Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fake News Friday, True North's preeminent show detecting the lies, the smears, the misinformation, the miscues, the mistakes, the hot takes, all of that, even the cold takes every now and then. I am Andrew Lawton in for Canada's Malcolm, joined as always by Harrison Faulkner, host of the fantastic True North podcast, Ratioed. Harrison, how was the week?
Pretty good, pretty good. We've got some usual suspects in the show this week, Andrew. We've also got some things we've always touched on, which is this weird hatred of the Canadian flag. So we've got quite the lineup that we're going to get into. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it's also, I should say, Calgary Stampede week, which is home to most of the fake news of everyone trying to pretend that they are, in fact, Albertans or even like that they like Westerners. So you'll see all these politicians and folks wearing cowboy hats. Do not be deceived, though here on Fake News Friday, we will ourselves stampede through the hearts and minds of Canadians as only we try to, humbly, of course. Let's actually start off on the Stampede, though, because CTV did this thing where a headline says a lot, sometimes about an outlet more than about a story. They used two photos to, I would say, misrepresent Trudeau's Calgary Stampede. One is from 2018, and this is one, as people have pointed out here, of Trudeau just, moseying about, doing his thing through the crowds. The other is from a Liberal fundraiser. And then, well, what happened here, Harrison?
So what we have here, Andrew, is actually perfect for this show. It is the absolute definition of fake news. And this Trudeau trip to the Calgary Stampede really, I think, it was straight out of a movie skit. It was a total disaster from start to finish. So they understood that right away. And all of a sudden, the Liberal spin doctors had to really kick it into high gear and get going. So what we have are two perfect examples of fake news. The first one, as you said, Andrew, is CTV using photographs of Trudeau pointing out to the crowd, looking all famous and looking like a star. But those turn out to be years ago. Those photos are from, one of them is from 2018. And what we then saw was perhaps the most absurd propaganda headline I've ever read. And of course, it was from the Canadian Press. It's a wire service. So when it gets written in the Canadian Press, all these legacy media outlets buy the article and then publish the exact same article in their on their website. So what we had were headlines coming out of the Calgary Stampede that read, "Trudeau mobbed by admirers. Happy Stampede. Trudeau mobbed by throngs of admirers," as the National Observer wrote. And the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star and CTV News, they all wrote this, they all republished this Canadian press story, Andrew, that said Trudeau mobbed by admirers at Stampede breakfast. Only one outlet got the message the day later. It was the Globe and Mail. They very quietly changed the headline. And the headline change went from Trudeau mobbed by admirers at Calgary Stampede pancake breakfast to Trudeau references inflation and Ukraine at the Calgary Stampede. So really, just a slight change there, Andrew. Nothing too drastic. I don't think anyone noticed.
Yeah, I mean, just as far as Trudeau admirers go, here's one clip that I think shows all that admiration. You can just hear and sense and feel the admiration shouting down to Justin Trudeau.
Will you shake my hand holding a freedom flag?
Thank you. You had your 20 seconds. It was a pleasure.
Are you 20 seconds, you communist? Go, Trudeau, you're nothing but a communist pig. That's what you are. You're disgusting. You should resign.
Free our political prisoners.
That's disgusting.
Yes, you had your 20 seconds. I'm moving on. That's what you say to your admirers, isn't it? When people are shouting at you with their cheer and their joy and their love and their adoration, that I know that's what it sounds like. In fairness to Trudeau, that may be about as admiring as it gets as of late, but it's the media covering for it. And that's, I think, the big story here always is that, politicians are going to get heckled. Politicians are going to be met, generally speaking, with, I think, similar crowds wherever they go. Trudeau, when he goes to Alberta in election campaigns, he does like an 11:30 p.m. rally because he doesn't want to waste time in the daylight in places where he's not going to win any votes. I mean, he's got that one MP there that is, I think, a disgraced MP at this point, George Chahal, that he was at flipping pancakes and all that. But this was not a friendly place for him. And when media says that, I'm like, I didn't even need to look at the videos to know I'm guessing he wasn't met by a mob or a throng or even a gaggle of admirers in the general public at the Calgary Stampede. I knew that was wrong before I even saw the footage, and so it's no surprise they ended up having to backtrack a bit there.
Well, it was, I mean, the article is still up all over the internet, Andrew, so it's only really the Globe and Mail that we have found that have actually, changed their headline to be somewhat representative of the truth, because it's almost as if these journalists aren't thinking about the fact that everyone is recording everything, especially when the Prime Minister shows up in their own backyard. They're going to have their phones out. They're going to record these so-called admirers. And if you hear in that video clip, it sounds as though in one of those clips, those admirers might be calling him a traitor. I'm not sure, Andrew, that doesn't sound like total admiration to me. But then again, I'm not a Canadian press journalist, so I don't really know what their definition of admiration, what their definition of admiration means, because it almost sounds as though I can hear the word traitor being used at Justin Trudeau. And like I said, this whole Calgary trip, this whole Stampede trip was a total disaster from the beginning. He not only did this pancake breakfast at a public library kilometers away from the Stampede grounds when the Conservatives were in the heart of the Stampede. And then again, it is Alberta, so it is sort of their province where they have most of the support. But it's pretty ridiculous to say that Trudeau was met by admirers or mobbed by admirers at the Stampede when he's not even at the Stampede grounds. And to be fair to Trudeau, he actually did go to the Stampede, but when he went there when there was no one around. So he toured an empty stadium, he toured empty grounds, and they did their absolute best to make it look as though Trudeau was mobbed by all these admirers. I mean, that headline is straight out of like a China People's Daily article, Andrew. It's ridiculous, yeah. Mobbed by admirers. It just, honestly, I think at this point we should all recognize that there really isn't a depth too low for these Canadian press, these legacy media journalists to go. And some people made the comment on Twitter that it was almost like an inside joke, that someone made a joke about making that the headline of the article, and then all these legacy media outlets didn't recognize it was a joke and they just went with it. And all of a sudden, there we go. There's this propaganda-like, Pravda-like headline of Trudeau and his admirers in Alberta. It's just ridiculous. And I will make one more point about the Stampede and about how all these politicians dress up and they put on the cowboy attire. Now, I understand I'm not an Albertan, but it seems very bizarre to me to have someone like Trudeau play dress up as a cowboy. It's almost like making a caricature of Albertans and being like, hey, look, I'm like one of you guys. I'm just like a regular Albertan. Look at me in my white cowboy hat with all my RCMP wearing the exact same hat. It's so ridiculous to me. I don't understand it.
I think, look, I'm going to give him some slack on that one, because as far as Trudeau's costumes go, this seems like one of the less offensive ones he's done. Like, we're talking about a guy that did like brown face and a turban. So as far as cowboys and Indians go, he's done the Indian costume, and that offends everyone. And the cowboy costume, I feel, is a little bit less offensive. But nevertheless, one thing I will say, he used the opportunity not just to do the glad hand, but also to do what I'm going to call pancake pandering. Because while he was flipping flapjacks, he was flapping his gums and talking about Ukraine, and very dramatically, inch by inch, step by step, he was talking about the progress that Justin Trudeau was making on Saturday. This is a piece in the Globe. And he says, this is a moment to gather and to celebrate being together once again. And then he talks about Ukraine. He said, we're facing more challenges with the war in Ukraine, with the global inflation crisis. So I believe he was solving those one flip at a time around the mob that never was. Let's talk a little bit about another, I'll say non-admirer, and that would be Patrick Brown's spokesperson vis-a-vis True North. So True North has been really leaning into covering the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. We have a lot of people in our audience who are Conservative members, or at the very least interested in Conservative politics. So I've been on my show doing these long-form interviews with all of the candidates. We've been talking to as many of them as we can. We've been covering their policy announcements. And we had a lot of difficulty getting an interview with Patrick Brown. He was our last candidate to speak to in this race. And it was very difficult. And now he's been disqualified from the race. I'm not saying the two are connected, but I am saying that we were actually trying from the get-go to cover Patrick Brown, and we have covered all the races. Well, we wrote yesterday a story, Noah Jarvis at True North wrote a story that was a very solid story about how even though he's been disqualified, he's still fundraising for his leadership campaign to the Conservative Party of Canada membership list. So he's still well being disqualified fundraising. This is a story we'd write about any candidate. And in true good journalistic fashion, Noah reached out to Patrick Brown's campaign and specifically his campaign spokesperson, Chisholm Pothier. And the statement we got back is absolutely fantastic here. Can quote me. So this is the entirety of his official response. Maybe you guys should stop being a newsletter for Poilievre and do some actual journalism, or maybe just organize another of the worst conservative leadership debates ever. Dealer's choice. We received the list that was given to us at the time to communicate to the members on that list. We continue to do so. Are you diligently exploring rumors of full-time consultants being paid by their companies to work on Poilievre's campaign? Because that would be actual journalism. So, by the way, this is the first time I've heard this rumor, so I can diligently explore the rumor all I want. But the story that Noah was writing was not about a rumor. It was about a fact which Chisholm Pothier confirmed in the third and fourth lines of this statement, which I think can best be characterized as a rant. And it's funny because when we've criticized Pierre Poilievre, whether it was on Bitcoin or just pushing back on some of his statements on various policies, people say, oh yeah, you're shilling for this candidate or that one. So this is like not the statement you give to endear yourself to any media outlet, is it, Harrison?
No, it's not. And I wonder how many media outlets have interviewed all of the candidates, given them and been very careful to make sure that we give them all the same amount of airtime and not to favor one or the other. So obviously we've done our part, but there's so many ways you can go into this statement. It's pretty much just gold from start to finish, starting with "can quote me" and ending with some rumor that would be actual journalism if we investigated it. But it's kind of interesting because part of me thinks that at this point in the Patrick Brown campaign, they have nothing to lose. They're out of the race. He's already endorsed John Charest, right? At this point, it would be kind of fun almost. You could just really throw anything you want out and attack who you want to attack, make jokes. So part of me kind of understands maybe they're just letting loose. But also, this is pretty fiery from Patrick Brown's spokesperson. It would almost be kind of interesting to see if Patrick Brown would have used this sort of language and attacked his opponents or attacked Justin Trudeau or attacked the left during the campaign with this kind of energy. I think that'd be kind of entertaining. It would have probably spiced up his campaign a little bit, don't you think?
Well, I mean, certainly his fundraising emails, like Patrick Brown was going after Pierre Poilievre in all of his recruitment emails. I did a search once, and at some point in the campaign, I can't remember when it was, and it was like of the 20 emails he had sent out, like 17 of them were about Pierre Poilievre. It was pretty crazy. But the funny thing is, like I've known Patrick Brown for many, many years, and he's always very friendly and amiable in person. So like I ran into him after the debate in Edmonton, the first official conservative leadership debate. And I've been like trying now for, I don't know, a week or 2 months or however long to get him on the show. And then he like comes up, he's like, Andrew, when am I coming on your show? And I'm like, you tell me, like, how about right now? So he's always very friendly. So he wouldn't even do this in person. But, you have the hatchet men who work on campaigns that are either moonlighting as, just anti-True North renegades or whatever, or perhaps this is an official, campaign position that we are supposedly a Poilievre newsletter. But I think one thing you'll find is that there are no outlets in the what we hear as the legacy media that are covering the conservative leadership race on the issues that matter to conservatives. And I think there's something quite telling about a campaign that doesn't seem to see the value in that, a campaign that wants to use CBC and Globe and Global to get out its message while trying to woo conservative members. And we know it just doesn't work.
No, exactly. And if we have to talk about this point about the debate, the worst conservative debate ever.
Hang on. Which one? I don't know if he was talking about like the independent press gallery debate from 2020, or if he's talking about like the Canada Strong and Free debate that Candace Malcolm and Jamil Javani did. I'm trying to figure that out.
No, exactly. And what are we going to consider the actual Conservative Party of Canada debate, the one that they put on where the moderator was asking all the candidates about their favorite books, their favorite food, their favorite music? Or are they going to talk about the one in which the candidates actually let loose, actually had some actual dialogue and real debate? It's ridiculous. So are we to assume that the debate put on by the party, where they were asked questions about their favorite books and their favorite TV shows to binge, is that better or worse for members than a debate that asks the candidates real questions? I mean, that debate was a total mockery of the process of the Conservative Party itself and the membership, whereas the debate hosted by the Canada Strong and Free Network was a legitimate debate. And then the IPG debate was a fireside chat because the candidates didn't even end up going. I mean,
Brown turned down this year's one. Yeah.
No, exactly. It's a very bizarre line to take. And I think there's better ammunition, better targets for them to go after than to talk about the debates, in which I think if you were to poll every Conservative member, I think the overwhelming majority would side on the side that says, no, the Canada Strong and Free debate was a legitimate debate. The Conservative Party English debate was a total joke, was a total farce of a debate.
Yeah, no, I think you're very right on that. Let's move to this one here. I'll let you take the lead on this one. The Toronto Star, again, not, I would say, always in touch with Canadians. This story, it seems they're not particularly in touch with Canada either.
Well, it's that's one way to put it, that they're not really in touch with Canadians, Andrew. I think some people might have more serious language to use about that. But the Toronto Star has, for some weird reason, spent a long time talking about why they hate the Canadian flag, why the Canadian flag needs to be, we need to stop flying the Canadian flag, or talk about the issues with the Canadian flag. They do seem to have an issue with it. And this latest op-ed by them, it probably takes the cake as the number one piece of lunacy that they've published about the Canadian flag.
Hang on, that's an ambitious. I would not say that, because they've probably published loony things that compete with this, certainly for a tie.
Well, I mean, Andrew, this op-ed is telling us that the way to reclaim the Canadian flag is to fly the pride flag beside it. So, I mean, we can say that, we've heard the left talk about the Canadian flag being a symbol of those evil, nasty truckers. We've heard the left talk about how the Canadian flag it's been co-opted by far-right groups. This is, I think, to me, this is pretty serious. To say that actually the best way to reclaim the Canadian flag is not to fly the Canadian flag with more, excitement or to fly it, in different places. No, it's to fly the Canadian flag beside the pride flag. In order to reclaim the flag, we need to fly it beside the pride flag. This is what it says about this. It says, one possibility is the co-display of flags, whereby co-branding is exercised. The idea to seek symbols that can be perceived as strong complements and signal the values desirable to be aligned with. Yes, so not only do we want to fly the pride flag beside the Canadian flag, we're trying to take on the meaning of what it means. We want to take on that pride flag meaning into our country. In practice, such an approach was observable when walking past the Canadian Embassy in Seoul, Korea, during the July 1st holiday weekend. A more sizable rainbow flag was visible alongside the Canadian flag. So it's great, Andrew. Our embassies in other countries on Canada Day are flying the pride flag, a more sizable pride flag, on the Canadian buildings. Just a great direction I think we're all heading in.
One of the things I find fascinating, so this year for Pride, I didn't actually see many pride flags, because the old pride flag of the rainbow colors has been replaced by a new pride flag, which I had never seen before, 2 months ago. So my position on this is fly your pride flag, fly whichever version of it you want. I mean, Canada's flag has changed over time, so we can add more colors to the pride flag. But I vehemently reject this idea that the Canada flag cannot stand on its own and fly on its own without needing to be qualified by something. So the idea that we would need to have the Canadian flag next to the pride flag to be happy with the Canadian flag, at that point, just change the Canadian flag then. I mean, because clearly you don't think it's something worth flying. And, when people like Justin Trudeau supported lowering the Canadian flag to half-mast indefinitely over Canada Day, throughout the election, it was something that people like me were bothered by because symbols matter, flags matter. And what he was saying is that this is not a country we can be proud of, and this is not a flag we can be proud of. And this is the direct consequence of that, because you're telling Canadians that your country is broken. And I don't mean broken in the sense of it's doing all these policy things we want to change, but fundamentally, structurally, a bad place. And this is, I think, what's happening now. So the idea that there are people like the Toronto Star's reporters here, CBC's reporters, some pollsters that say, yeah, this is actually offensive. Anyone who flies the Canadian flag is doing something offensive. And the only way, I mean, the Canadian flag, well, if you put up a Canadian flag, you're probably a trucker sympathizer, unless it's a Canadian flag next to a pride flag. That's how we know you're really inclusive. It's like, at what point do we just say, you know what, screw the whole thing. Canada doesn't get to be a country anymore.
No, and the article actually says, Andrew, exactly the point you just made. In the article, the Toronto Star writes, while the rainbow or pride flag is a symbol of the LGBT community, the commonly associated proclamation, love is love, has wider applicability. The co-display of flags near the building's front entrance cues that Canada aspires to be a nation of diversity and inclusiveness. So Canada is aspiring to be a nation of inclusivity and diversity. Do we have to aspire to that? Or is Canada probably one of the only countries that does that in the way that we do? I mean, maybe we should try to be, better. Should we try and emulate the Middle East or some Asian countries? That maybe that would be better for us. Through co-branding, the Canadian flag can be effectively reclaimed, is what they say. Now consulate attention must turn to providing passports. So they put that spin on it as though they're kind of pretending not to be so serious. But of course they're serious, Andrew. This is what they actually believe. This is what people like this really believe, that if you fly the Canadian flag on its own, you must be some nationalist, some evil nationalist, someone who's proud of the country that they shouldn't be proud of because we're not inclusive enough yet. We're not diverse enough yet. The only way that they think it's acceptable to fly the Canadian flag is if you fly it beside a pride flag. And who knows, at this point, the rainbow flag sooner or later might become a hate symbol because it doesn't have that weird South African style pride progress flag with the triangle in it now, so it's just absurd. And I do believe, based on the other headlines that Toronto Star has written about the flag, see, John Kay over at Quillette tweeted a photo of all the different Toronto Star op-ed headlines about the flag. We've got the Freedom Convoy occupation of Ottawa besmirched the Canadian flag. The innocuous Canadian flag, the Ottawa occupation move is a step away from that naivete. When I see the Canada flag now, it hurts my heart as Freedom Convoy returns as a tug of war over the Maple Leaf. So it's all.
See, I told you they had loonier stuff there in the archives.
Well, it depends. I mean, it's all of these people talking about the op-ed regarding the Freedom Convoy related stories. This is now saying, unless you fly the Canadian flag beside the pride flag, you are promoting racism. You are promoting some sort of nationalism that we're not allowed to. I don't know what's worse, Andrew. We're going to have to perhaps agree to disagree or leave it up to the audience to see what they think about what's worse. The stories about the Freedom Convoy and the flag being a representative of the Freedom Convoy, or having to fly the flag beside the pride flag. Something that I think is just absolutely ridiculous. Something that I think, we should all say we've gone a bit too far here. We're not flying a rainbow flag beside the Canadian flag on all of our government buildings. Don't tell that to Justin Trudeau, though, because it will happen.
I just like that they use the word co-branding. So now the idea is for the government to use like Instagram influencer language and corporate jargon. So we'll be doing synergies, we'll be doing co-branding, we'll be doing partnerships, we'll be doing it all. And it starts at your local government office. Let's close things off with a fun one here. This was one you found, Harrison.
Yeah, so this is a great CBC news story, keeping Canadians informed and really living up to their mandate, Andrew. Because
with a price tag of $1.4 billion a year.
$1.4 billion to give Canadians timely, factual news to make sure all Canadians are in the know about what's going on in our country. So, of course, thank goodness, the CBC, feeling a little like they were perhaps not keeping Canadians informed enough, on Wednesday, wrote an article by this woman. See, it's getting very confusing these days, Andrew, but I'm going to go with woman because the name is Renee Yoxon. They wrote an op-ed from Renee Yoxon, who is let me just get this right here. Renee Yoxon is a voice coach, a gender-affirming voice coach, not just a voice coach, a gender-affirming voice coach. And this op-ed is talking about how people have the ability, Andrew, to feminize or masculinize their voice while they're going through their gender transition. So there's a video of this. CBC News published this video because it's important to remind Canadians, this is what your taxpayer dollars are going to. When you see this stuff, this is where it's going. So of course they write this long op-ed about feminizing or masculinizing your voice, but who really reads those these days? They put out a video for us, a TikTok, Andrew, and we're just going to watch this, and I want to get your reaction to it as you're watching it. Let's play this video.
My name is Renee Yoxon, and I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher from Montreal. Today, I'm going to prove to you that you already have everything you need to create a speaking voice that you love using one quick exercise.
I have everything I need.
To start, I'm going to have you say a small, cute key. 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 Now, try a big, relaxed
More feminine, Andrew. Come on.
Oh.
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 Oh. If you're trying to masculinize your voice, I want you to say that big, relaxed
What am I doing now?
and then memorize that shape and use it when you say
it big and relaxed.
So, like
Okay, so O is the masculine
Oh.
word. Oh.
Oh.
Okay, I got to do the
Key.
hands. Key.
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 Now, if you're trying to feminize your voice, I want you to say that small and cute key.
I have to say key
memorize
again.
that shape
Key.
and then hold it when you go and say oh.
Oh.
Like a woman.
Key.
Oh.
Key.
I can't say O the way, like key and O are different.
Oh. Creating a speaking voice that best represents your gender identity is something that
The pitch
everybody
isn't
can
even
do.
changing. Like, I don't even know, like, okay, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm supposed to like keep my mouth the shape of when I say key, while I say, okay, key. Oh, they're different words.
Andrew,
this is like miles above my head. This is like a level of complication that I have not mastered yet. Like I just thought you could just raise the pitch. Like I can go, oh, or I can go key. Like that. I didn't need an exercise for that.
Are you saying, Andrew, that Renee has not taught you how to feminize your voice properly yet? Because it's in all of us. We have the skills in all of us, Andrew. So you got to keep working on it. We'll have to come back to it next week, I think, when you've had some time to practice. You've worked on your keys and your O's. Memorize the shape. That's what she says. And I think, this is the kind of content that without it, I don't know where we'd be as a country, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fearful that this will just demonstrate to CBC that they need to do like a longer video, that I've not sufficiently grasped this. So I need to go back to the drawing board. So okay, can you do the key O thing? Because I just thought if you wanted to sound like a woman, you raise your voice. If you want to sound like a man, you lower your voice. That like the key O thing just confused me more.
No, well, I'm also in the same position. I'm not exactly sure when she says memorize those shapes, say it big and loud or say it cute. Like key is a cute key. I'm not there just yet either. I think we have some studying to do, some CBC studying to do.
Yeah.
And
I feel like when I do the O, I've just like called a crow to my house door. I feel like if I'm doing this, eventually you're just gonna hear birds slapping up against the window because my O is not as Renee did a better O than I did. My key was pretty strong though. Renee
is clearly the expert here, and again,
that's why she's the coach. That's why she's the coach.
Exactly. I do worry about there's a lot going on these days in the country. There's a lot of news, but this is the kind of thing that keeps us all sane, right? It keeps us all in a level playing field. When we see this, we go, okay, we're still living in regular times. Things haven't totally gone nuts. Our public broadcaster is teaching us how to masculinize and feminize our voices. I mean, that's just really at this point, it's just par for the course with the CBC.
I'm told that True North has started a TikTok recently. I feel like we need to get like the Key O challenge going and get all of our, True North fans to like let us know how they make out on that. If you guys do better than I do, we maybe have to do a follow-up next week, and we'll play your masculine O's and your feminine keys. And and there's got to be like a non-binary word in the middle there that we can do as well. We don't want to leave out the non-binary.
Yeah, masculine and feminine. That seems kind of like one or the other. I didn't know that's where we were. I didn't know that's where we were. I thought we were past that. I thought we were at least a few months past that. That we can be whoever we want to be. We can find some place in the middle that fits us best.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing here is that the old ethos that I used to be told and that I used to hear told to other people was be who you want to be. So the idea that now it's have performance, that if you want to be who you want to be, you have to like fundamentally change yourself, is I think moving in the opposite direction of progress. But nevertheless, I will we'll work on my phonics. my phonic sounds and my phonemes and all of this, and we'll have to get back to you later on this. Thanks for making me subject myself to that, Harrison.
You've got some work to do with that, Andrew, I have to say.
Harrison Faulkner, host of Ratioed on True North, and yours truly, host of the less creatively titled Andrew Lawton Show on True North. Andrew Lawton. We will be back next week with more Fake News Friday here on True North. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.